It's going to start on that end of the room, and I'm going to start over here, and we're going to meet in the middle at democracy because that's where it all happens. So, Brett, you want to go and just tell us where's a preponderance happening over there?
Well, we have, I'm in economic development, and Kim's added her last star, which is actually now skewing my count. Thank you. Actually, pretty even distribution with extended license, driver license to all workers at 7. Just gonna make sure but there's a lot clustered at 5. Well, here's 6. Reduce recidivism, receives 6 stars. But we have a lot clustered at 5, including increased state investment to serve entrepreneurs of color, invest in development dollars. Again, Kim with the last minute piece on there. Established a state bank, actually hit 5 as well. Let's see, where's number 5? Recognize and leverage immigrants as key sources of the workforce. And then we have strategies at 3 and 2s, kind of going down from there. So again, even distribution out of the economic development area. So we're gonna have some fun times putting that together for us.
And does anybody out in the audience have any comments about the economic development area as you were trying to figure out where maybe put your stars over in that point, how you came to some decisions? Or
Kim?
I think what I felt when I got to there, and my background is economic development, so I'm like, where's all the stars? But actually they're over here in human, there's so much intersection between our economic development environment and everything else. And the economic development environment, in some ways, requires that all this rest of this infrastructure get built and built well. So economic development is like human potential reflected elsewhere.
Yep, so Jane, go ahead and take that.
I'm going to take human potential next. Speaking of, I really love this. I've done community development work for 30-some years, and the wisdom is always in the room, and it's right here. You guys are the wisdom. So I'm just going to summarize this because they, like economic development, there is somewhat of a spread, but there's actually, I sort of see some, as I call it, sort of preponderance of stars in a couple of areas, and one that is somewhat surprising because it didn't have a whole lot of intersections. Bless you. So the one that I'm seeing over here in human potential with lots of stars and lots of intersections is post-secondary educational alternatives and career pathways. And I've been hearing a lot of that too, just in chatter and all the meetings that I've gone to over the last couple of months. So that's right on. And then the other one that I spotted here with a lot of stars, fewer intersections, but it's expand access to existing state health programs as a step towards single-payer healthcare. So that got quite a few stars and two or three intersections. So, and then last but not least, stars and intersections, and a couple of post-its, improve food access equity. So as a part of human potential, because you can't learn if you're hungry. So, any comments, questions about, or just sharing about what made you put a star someplace in human potential? Okay, right, you got those folks over there, Jim and Gail.
This isn't a comment on that, but I wanted to ask that I know early childhood was another option and got some takers. I don't think a preponderance, as you say, but since there's been a state effort on that, would we continue to advocate for that because of the work that's already happened in that area? And we know it's just, I guess I'm thinking I didn't do that one heavily because we're moving in that direction. So what happens with that one? Because I think we know we need a good solid base
right
to do the rest.
Yep, and that's That's a great question, Gail, because I think that as we've been putting the blueprint together and you've been helping on the higher ed part too, that there are things that people are working on in earnest, like the childcare situation. And so while we may not show a lot of preponderance there, although I did put my star there, that is something that I think this group should consider, and certainly Growth and Justice, and I'm assuming 1MN.org as well, would be allies for, supporting. One of the last things we want to do is duplicate effort.
Yeah.
So we'll join on the bandwagon on some of these things. Yeah.
And that one we were just mentioning around the career pathways is funding area. Okay, sorry.
Then we'll go back to
Funding allies within unions and or larger employers, or especially different industries, because getting conservative legislators on board when you have large employers talking about it, it just seems like how do you find those allies or coalitions with business partners, community colleges, and or unions?
For childcare.
No, for the workforce pathways.
Oh, workforce pathways, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, Jim Hart, I'm a healthcare guy, and I've been waiting to say this for 24 hours, so I better say it pretty soon. But that's where the money is. We were talking about this over dinner last night. As you look around, both in the private sector and the public sector, that it's not all public money, obviously, but we spend something on the order of $50 billion or so for healthcare every year in Minnesota. It would be pretty easy to get 10 or 15% of that out of there if we had a more efficient system. So that's a big number, and that would fund a lot of these other initiatives. So perhaps that's why maybe there isn't the intersectionality on the surface, but that's where the money is. And as you look around, there just aren't those other big pools of waste out there, frankly.
Anybody?
I want to talk about the intersection between human potential and economic development, and it may be there or it may not. I have found that when people get to be 65 and they're financially unprepared for life, that most often that comes because they haven't had appropriate models that they've imitated in terms of learning how to manage their resources and be prepared for that. And we're very imitative people. You can't picture an ad without somebody that's framing a desired object. And we can see how people spend, but we don't see how people save. And so what I would advocate on that intersection is more programs of mentorship, either within the corporation or without, or particularly around entrepreneurial kinds of endeavors. I lead a group called Money Stories. People come one night a month for 6 months, and every person spends a whole evening telling their history with money, from grade school on all the way through. And then others can observe and listen to that. And so what I'm saying is I think we need more of that. It's kind of like this, but more structured sharing of models so that people can be entrepreneurial and have a pathway forward.
Right, and we're not retiring, we're refiring, right? Anybody over 50? Anybody over 60? Okay, we're refiring. Okay. Brett, I think you're up for environment, climate,
And
natural resources.
Yes, okay. Again, I'm amazed at the spread, a little bit more clustering here, I want to make sure I'm seeing this correctly. So what is, let's see, we have, there it is. Leading the CE and R area is ensuring benefits of environmental protections, natural resources conservation, access, climate-resistant, resilient infrastructure. So again, I'm catching this infrastructure conversation, really building up the necessary foundation for the state to kind of thrive in. Strengthening farm economy and expanding that equitable access to farming as a way of life. It's going to be very interesting as we try to make the adjustment back to the ground. Actually starting to provide our own resources, food and everything else. That was the best intersection and stars that I see up here Well, other one was as well. Increasing state funding to improve wastewater and drinking water. Tom, I know this is one of your things as well, but with the focus on greater Minnesota, I would almost add we should be talking about urban settings as well, as the first spring suburbs and the city actually is going through, is going to be tested as well over the next couple. One other I will highlight is the increased Minnesota's renewable energy standard. Little bit of intersectionality. We've got 7 stars up here, so very spread out. Very clustered, very pointed responses in that area. Anybody have any questions or comments on that cluster of ideas?
Can we just add clean energy to the access one? Because a lot of the rural co-ops are resisting solar and things, so it makes it hard if you want to do solar in the wrong territory.
Which one was that?
Anyway, just adding clean energy to this one if it's not a print. Let's see.
We have solar, wind,
Because if you're not in Excel territory, it's a bit dicey for a lot of the things.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we'll go to, I believe that's fiscal infrastructure. That's next, or? I can't see. Jane, you're up.
Okay, physical infrastructure, and again, I was looking for sort of preponderance of stars, and the first 2 areas that really jumped out here, and I did not count the stars, but they will be counted. The broadband and digital inclusion, and full disclosure, I did not put any stars on there. I did not put any intersections on there, even though that's one of my pet passions, and I did not lobby anybody. So
That was a pure response, people.
okay, this was your response. So, and housing, recognizing correct lack of access to affordable housing, focus attention on communities of color and rural communities, and then the next tier, if you will, improve state and local infrastructure through creation of a state infrastructure office, support for the existing Minnesota Public Finance Authority and multi-sector public-private collaboration, and then the equitable expansion of public transportation and a statewide transportation investment through increased gas tax based on MnDOT recommendations. So I would say, just looking at it, and you can come up and correct me if I'm wrong, there are a couple that stand out here, and then there are a few that got 1 star, maybe 3 stars. But again, everything's going to be coming in to the blueprint. And as Char just asked me, if something's missing, can we still add it? Yes. Tell Kate. Send Kate a post-it. Email Kate a post-it. So, you want to say something about that?
I should have spoken up earlier, but I was just thinking that I know in the conversation in Granite Falls, we talked about the Bank of Minnesota as being a bank for entrepreneurials, for all sectors. And then somehow it got lost in the, shuffle or something, that we were also talking about it for just lay people who need access to capital for car repairs or buying a house or whatever. So I think that could be expanded, is what I was thinking of. A Bank of Minnesota that serves all the people for all purposes, and could also do some education in retirement planning.
I have a caution and a plea on infrastructure. Infrastructure is the neglected and necessary underpinning of water, housing, broadband, and within that dull subject, the probably dullest aspect and most neglected is asset management. which has one lone little star, because I was told I couldn't put all 8 on it. But most or many Minnesota municipalities who have infrastructure problems don't have the staff or resources to even plan or manage it, and asset management are tools and systems that deal with that. Unfortunately, they require money and effort.
And Tom, that is gonna be front and center with the MN 2050, it's in the report, but in terms of
That's a
advocacy.
Topic we push
Yeah.
in Minnesota 2050, but it's an uphill battle because it's tough stuff to do.
Yep. And so that's a really great example of, while it didn't get a whole lot of stars here, it's something that I think we've, as a group, and or at least some of us as part of this group, really want to be allies for. And a couple of us, came to your meeting, when was that, a month or two ago, of the MN 2050 group. And thank you for inviting us. And so that's a really great example of people who are right on the ground and have the expertise, and can use some of our support to say this is a foundational issue, literally, for anything else to happen.
Yeah, another problem with it is it tends to be long range, and my colleagues who don't yet benefit from a Minnesota pension have to look at the shorter range, like next year's projects. And this is more important, but doesn't seem urgent.
Right.
I mean, Tom, could you also just share, like, where the money would come from? Is like local government aid getting that beefed up again? Like, where are these small towns, like, what is the money source you guys are promoting to like fix infrastructure?
As engineers, we are more focused on what the need is, and while there are multiple money sources, I think we'd start saying, well, that's a legislator's job to figure out how to pay for it. But there are user charges, different forms of taxes, and they're all objectionable to the person paying it. But if they don't pay now, it'll be more expensive tomorrow. And that's not an answer, because we don't know what the best system is to pay for it.
Well, I think the League of Cities probably has recommendations, so we should find out from them what they're recommending.
Yeah, and Kevin Frizzell was here yesterday from the league, so I know he's certainly listening to what's happening, and he's part of the partner group, so, yeah. Okay, well, should we move to democracy here together?
Our last bucket.
Two pretty obvious ones. At
Yeah,
least that we're
two
doing
that
here.
rose to the top of the pile.
With stars anyway.
Yep, ensuring nonpartisan redistricting, and there's a smaller movement that's taking place. I am also chair of Minnesota Common Cause, and our executive director has taken this up as our central cause for our legislative agenda. So we already have a partner organization that's leading the charge on that conversation. So, but we probably need to amplify the voice with our statewide network to ensure that this is an issue that is a major priority. So I'm actually quite proud without having to advocate for this one myself. So thank you, everybody.
And the other one that seems to have gotten quite a few stars in the universe is the Restore Felony Voting Rights after release from prison / jail. So supporting Restore the Vote, which also is another active coalition, and so one that we would be looking at in terms of a legislative agenda as allies.
We do have two that are kind of hovering just below that. campaign finance reform. We all can agree that money is definitely very pervasive in our current system, and actually a lot of the inequities and quite honestly just the tragedies that are taking place stems from this conversation as well. So I'm happy to see that this actually captured some people's attention as well, and then
The census, which is important for everything. And I would just go back to the number 82, which Ivory pointed out, is not necessarily something that the state legislature could mandate or whatever, but it is something that the political parties could take up
yes.
and are taking up. And I know there's other informal groups organizing as the next election is already kicking into high gear. So that definitely is a kind of community-based strategy that any of us here and all of us need to keep working on. So it got 2 stars, but tons of intersections. So yeah.
So I mean, any comments on democracy? Any comments on democracy?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we have a problem with partisan districting in Minnesota? Because I've heard of issues in other states, but it's not something that's really been brought to attention here.
Quick little history. Minnesota has been blessed / cursed for the past 6 cycles of having it go to our judiciary process, where we actually have split government and we can't decide, make a decision on that, so it goes to our judges, which is per our process. So we have not had partisan redistricting, but what we're trying to prevent more than anything else is if a party actually has full rule, and the past practice, and we see it across the country, has been some very egregious maps. Wisconsin definitely was slapped on the hand last cycle. Maryland was a legendary map. I mean, you just kind of say, wow, oh my God. So what we're trying to do is prevent the conversation. So currently the rule is that the legislators are the ones that make the decision. What we're trying to say is that the people should be the ones that actually draw the lines. It's been, again, affirmed by the Supreme Court out of what the ruling regarding Arizona and I want to say California was in that one, but saying that, yes, the people are very well equipped to go to draw their own lines. And I think that, along with campaign financing, we'll start to have better outcomes as it relates to our elections. But Minnesota is much better off than a lot of the states in the union, for sure.
Okay, well, maybe we can talk a little bit about immediate next steps, just to remind you on all of what's up on the wall here. I'm looking at Kate because she's gonna, the crack research team is gonna help compile all the dots, all the stars, all the notes, and formulate a draft legislative agenda with priorities. And what you may see is, I don't know, Kate, the top half or the top third, or but it will be a draft that everybody will get to see here. The 40 of you that I think are still here in the room. And then we'll keep moving on, and we need to move on fairly quickly because our plan is to try to unveil this agenda in mid-January.
Yeah.
And those of you who were at the Prairie's Edge, Upper Sioux, Granite Falls meeting in June, you noticed there was a big crew taping the whole thing in addition to Ann and her team. Pioneer Public Television is going to be putting out a 20 or 30 minute video about that same time. We're going to try to coordinate it on the whole Thriving by Design process and some of the interviews they were able to make. So we want to try to coordinate the the unveiling of the agenda with that and talk about the blueprint as well. Again, I just want to reiterate that what we've done here this Monday and Tuesday, the 24 hours that we've been together, is working on the legislative agenda that is part of, related to family with equity blueprint, and the equity blueprint is a much larger document. Kate, how big of a document is it going to be, you think, at this point? Dane and Kate are the head honchos on that.
It'll be as tight as we can get it.
It'll be 100 pages.
50 pages front and back.
First draft was going to be at least 100
Yeah,
pages.
we'll probably get it down to 30, 40 or something. I mean,
But if you look at other documents, you know, that other groups have put together nationally, a lot of times any effort at a comprehensive equity agenda, one that includes climate action, one that includes all the pieces that make for a better, healthier economy and a fairer society,
holistic,
is going to have to be extensive, and we want some detail. We want some want photos and graphics that tell the story
data maps
and the need, and data maps. So it's going to be a big document, and
I think you'll be really proud of it.
And I just wanted to say that this has been a kind of a dream of mine since I started at Growth and Justice, and Jane really and the newer team, the staff that she's put together, and our partnership with Brett has really got me excited. I think we're going to have one of the very few, if not the only, comprehensive agendas that are not just for the legislature, but for communities and for businesses and for everyone to pay attention to.
On this Minnesota team.
Right, on this imperative.
The communities.
The imperative that we have justice in this state, and that it's a primary driver of policy, is equity and climate action, taking into account our regional disparities too. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Could I ask if, here we are as individual, like,
More to go on this one.
blueprint people, like, are our organizations, do we ask organizations to formally endorse the thing?
Yes.
Do they get listed, and then can we have, like, other coalitions, like the Transportation Forward, we could send them this thing so they could mention it, you could get cross promotion with other coalitions and all that?
Yes, we're expecting that the final document, and to some extent the initial legislative agenda, will have the logos of key partners, and we've already got more than 2 or 3 dozen who are indicated willingness to affix their logos to this cause.
Yeah, if you recall, and I'm going to just call for a show of hands, how many people were at the June meeting in Granite Falls, Upper Sioux, Ferry's Edge? Oh, awesome, so more than half. Okay. How many people took the IDI, and you'll know what IDI is if you took it? Okay, great, because that's another thing. We need to do some follow-up with those of you who have taken the IDI and got a little coaching. And I want to say at this point that the Landon Foundation funded that aspect of the work of the Driving by Design network building. And the McKnight Foundation has also helped fund this whole One Minnesota framework work, which is the blueprint as well. So, and Growth and Justice donors, some of them are sitting in the audience here. So it's really been both a community and foundation effort, and we continue to work to try to find additional funds to keep the process going, because it is somewhat expensive, but necessary, as Dane said, to get this manifesto out for not only the biennium, but truly as a guide map, a roadmap for hopefully our next 4 years and our next decade, if you will, of trying to have a more comprehensive plan for our state and for local communities. And if you'll bear with us for a little bit longer here, Brett and I would like to run through a couple of details on some of those next steps, and let's just repeat some about the legislative agenda that Kate's crack research team's going to compile, and then we'll get out a draft to you. Like I said, there's about 40 people here that were able to come. We will get that out to others that are part of the Driving by Design network, but you're the key here in terms of identifying the priorities for the agenda. We'll be putting a press conference together of some kind at the state capitol, and if people are willing to join us, we'll let you know when and where that would be, and again, trying to time it with the Pioneer Public Television video. Les Heen has been a great partner in this and keeps in touch with us about the timing on that. And then we really are looking at this 5 months of presentation and advocacy wherever we can go, particularly with legislators who are either already carrying certain bills that cover this or trying to get people to cover it. And Brett or Dane or others who we'll all be involved in that, but I think that's part of the strong bailiwick of OneMN.org and Growth and Justice Together. We will also endeavor, with Sarah's help and some of the tracking mechanisms that we have, to track related bills and keep people apprised of the different legislative actions and timing on the parts of the legislative agenda that might be up for either testifying or just are on the docket. And if you hear of anything, and we'll talk about the network in just a minute, please tell us. Please tell Sarah. Sarah will continue to be the point person on the larger team for the public policy outreach and managing that process with all of us as her team members, because we are a flat organization. We're not organizations. We're not hierarchical. Any other ideas or comments? I mean, this is a very basic, so that you can get the gist of what we're going to be trying to do, certainly in the next month. It's already going to be January, I can't believe it. And then, looking all the way to May, which we know how things go right to the end. Any advice, comments? And we will get to the point in the morning here yet before you go to be able to go around on these different items and write in if you know of organizations that are already working on it, or if you want to work on it in particular with this whole team, or you just want to make sure that you're supporting it. So we'll get to that point as well. So let me just say a couple of things about the blueprint, which, even in my head after working in this for 6 months, it finally came to me, we have two products. We have the legislative agenda and we have the blueprint document. And so again, last 2 days here, or 24 hours, we've been working on the agenda. Totally been informed by and from and with the equity blueprint document. We will also have a press conference either alongside the legislative agenda or separate from, talking about a rollout of the blueprint. Rather than putting the whole thing out all at once, we really want to try to zero in on regions of the state, and I'm looking at Dawn and others who kind of head up regions. Dawn Espy from the Region 5 Development Commission here. And these are some of the partner groups, tying the chapter topics, which are the buckets, the issue buckets, policy buckets, to regions strategically, where great ideas are popping up, or the need is particularly great, or as somebody said yesterday, maybe there's a legislator that we really want to zero in on and do this rollout press conference in their district, and then have a community briefing with us. So kind of make a day of it. Some of you may not know that I was the head of the Statehood Sesquicentennial Commission 10 years ago, and we had capitals for a day throughout that commemoration time to learn about our state and the good and the bad of it. And the community briefings could take on that kind of a feel, that we would have a presence for a day in a region on the Blueprint chapter. With your help, if you happen to be from that particular region or that community, to come and be a part of that, both release of this great information and the storytelling that can happen in terms of what's going on in those particular regions with that particular chapter. So that would take place, we think, over the next 3 months, January, February, March, so that it's done still within the 5-month time frame of the legislative schedule itself. But again, we want to try to make sure that people have time to get that comprehensiveness soaked in, because this is going to be a pretty, I won't call it a dense document, but it's a very wise document. And you need to sit with it for a while to see the connections, as we've been doing here for the last 24 hours. Anything else you want to say on the blueprint? Anybody who's been working on it? I think Kate asked for a show of hands of people that have been working actually on the issue briefings or reviews of it. And I think there's a couple people here still left that were part of that. So thank you all for doing that. And like the agenda, we'll continue to reach out and ask for input as that process continues. So then we'll go to the network, and this is probably the essential thing, but probably the weakest thing. And I'll just say that as someone who helps build networks.
We're just starting.
We're starting, right. I mean, I want to give ourselves a hand, pat on the back, because we've done all this in 6 months. You've done all this in 6 months. It's pretty extraordinary.
Yes.
Some of this can take years, and we know that we have this opportunity. It's a special opportunity with the change in administration and with the idea that we have to, as we learned in Granite Falls and Upper Sioux, that change is upon us, and we need to open the door to opportunity for everybody. And to do that, we need to create a network of people and weave that network across boundaries, across sectors. I've always done all my work across sectors. I used to help run the Minnesota Rural Partnership, which did what Sean was talking about, getting state agencies and private sector and nonprofits and tribal communities and education to work together for the good of greater Minnesota. And then we started to think we should do rural and urban together. So that's kind of what we're trying to build here, is a network of people that understand where we each stand. And I think you were saying it, Kim, at breakfast this morning, that some small towns and urban neighborhoods have a lot more in common with each other than other places in Minnesota do. And so the idea of this network is to try to build support for each other and build support for the agenda and the blueprint going forward, and literally to shift the systems into one that not only favors but embraces equity and inclusion, not only as a driver for the economy but as a moral imperative. So I'm going to pass it to Brett to say a few more words, and then I want to talk about what a system shifting network is from June Holly's perspective. And anybody know June Holly? She spoke at the Small Town Symposium a couple years ago. She's a network weaving professional. Yep, Kim knows. Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Brett?
I'm just going to say what you guys have done over the past couple of months is nothing short of remarkable. It is going to challenge the status quo. But we have to stick with it. I like Dane. This is a dream come true for a small, fledgling, scrappy little organization that had the ability, thank you to Growth and Justice, and thank you to everybody to allow us to walk with you in this journey as well. And the best is yet to come. Again, we are talking about something that's going to change our society for all. And not necessarily where we're taking away from those currently in power or whatever else,
Yes.
but we're
Yes, it is.
equally distributing. We are equitably distributing the necessary resources and the ideas so we can actually be a part of it. So we are excited. This fulfills our desire and mission. And just, I don't think everybody knows, OneMN.org is actually concluding our business. We sunset in December 31st, 2022. So we have hair on fire. And what this vehicle has been able to allow it to do is to move things along. So this piece right here is going to be a lasting legacy, hopefully, from our standpoint. Yes, Beth?
Yeah, I think this has got to include things like getting rid of slave factories known as sheltered workshops.
I like it, and that's something that you gotta get to Kate right away by email.
And
I don't have email.
Oh,
Beth-
we'll figure it out.
Beth, I was taking notes yesterday, so we are adding the disabilities, all the things that you mentioned, and we'll try to include if not well, we won't be putting a chapter in,
Because
but it'll.
otherwise, people like that will continue to get away with segregating us and paying us less cash. That's not.
Well, that's what we get to challenge this whole process. But I cannot stress this enough. As we have organizational coalitions and everything else, this is going to happen in your backyards. So those meetings that took place that Sarah put together, again, thank everybody. Please give Sarah a round of applause again for
Where's the camera for that?
I can clearly, again, the inspiration to be able to see what was going on was shared through Sarah, to be able to make sure that we understood the importance of what you were doing on the ground, in the neighborhoods. And we have to expand. We have to really start to get this thing together. So if you have friends and neighbors in New London, Spicer, all in the area, and Region 5, and out in Bemidji and everything else, that this is where we get to change everything, right in your backyards. So that's what I'm excited for over the next couple. And again, if you think that, OneMN's a little impatient, OneMN.org's a little impatient.
You've only been around for 17 years.
Only been around for 17 years, but we're mic dropping in 5. I mean, we're out. But intentionally, so we were not here to continue to dance around the problem. We're here to solve. Solution areas is what we're trying to achieve with you. So I can't stress enough, thank you again for allowing us to be a part of this. And again, I'm looking forward to mid-January to really put this market down and see how many people start to dance when they start to see, you want to create a state bank? What? You want universal health care? Huh? You want to see agriculture actually tie in with infrastructure? Come on, y'all are asking too much. Yes, we are. And it's time to move, so that's what I'm looking forward to working with you guys on.
Same here.
Let's go!
We're not ready to go yet, but hang in there. So to accomplish all this, I mean, as Brett said, OneMN.org has been around, or I said, for 17 years. So has Growth and Justice, actually. We're a little bit younger, started in 2002. We will be 17 in 2019. And many other organizations like the Regional Development Commissions have been around since the 1970s to do the kind of comprehensive planning and such. And at one time, and I'll get off my soapbox very quickly here, but we had the state planning agency that actually coordinated with the regional development commissions. And now we don't have a state planning agency, and so the RDCs are out there doing the work.
Trying to hold it together.
Trying to hold it together and doing a great job of it, but could certainly use more coordination assistance from state and federal government. And it really has come down to communities. Communities have always been where the ideas come from. As I said, I'm a community development person from way back. That is my professional affiliation. And the kind of community development that does push for comprehensive, interconnecting webs of people and disciplines, because we all have to be in there together. So for me too, this is a dream come true to see a more comprehensive approach to policymaking, and not only policymaking, but community strategy. And some of you mentioned that yesterday. And to do that, we need a system shifting network. That's what Thriving by Design can become. And I just listed a couple of elements that June Hawley, if you get a chance, look up network weaving. She has a website. She started this back in the Appalachian area of the United States. And I had heard of her when I was doing the early work on internet and e-commerce and trying to do entrepreneurship at a very local level with the new thing called the internet. Anne was doing training of all those local businesses, and she still is doing that. But June took it to a next level. She was helping local entrepreneurs in Appalachia, and she realized that to really get things moving, they needed a network. And that's what entrepreneurs do, they network. And I mean, this is what Brett does, and I do, and all of us do. But sometimes we stay in our own network, and what we're asking people to do is go outside your usual network and interconnect, which is what the internet actually was about. Remember it was called the interconnection web or something? I can't remember. Anne would probably know. But there are elements that June has identified that are really key, and that the network can and should be working towards system shifting. And to do that, they're continually forming new collaborations, trying to learn more about the system they're trying to disrupt and trying to change. That happens a lot within sort of single system networks. It doesn't happen a whole lot across networks. And that's what we're trying to do, is connect across all of these different networks. And because we are bringing in new people, you're bringing in new people, new connections, often from underrepresented groups, populations into the collaborations, that brings new perspectives, that brings innovation, that challenges assumptions. I can say from my position as a person of white middle-class privilege that I've been challenged many times by the assumptions I have about the place that I grew up in, and what I thought was what, and what I now know is. And so it results then in more effective projects because we're much better informed about one another's perspectives and thinking. And I'm just going to take another quick moment to introduce a student of mine, Stephen. Raise your hand. I teach a class called Perspectives 301. What's the name of the class, Stephen? Perspectives on Educational Philosophy and Planning. Okay, but really what it is teaching people how to be part of a system shifting network, which is society. We have a class of about 20-some people. We meet every Tuesday night, and people like Stephen who you're from Nicaragua. Nigeria, right, Nigeria originally. And a lot of people coming into this country as immigrants. We have a couple people that have just gotten out of prison. People who have started their degree and stopped out to raise a family and are back after 30 years. We not only work on perspectives about the whole of society, but people actually get to create their own degree plan, individualized study degree plan. And I started to think about that. I was teaching the class this semester. We're creating the degree plan for Minnesota from all of these perspectives. And so it's this system shifting network that's essential, that we all come together face to face like we have done, we're able to do both in Granite Falls and Upper Sioux, and now here in Hinckley, and and also in the community meetings that have happened in between, because it is bringing in all these new perspectives and challenging assumptions, and then we create a better product, if you will, because of all of that. But we have to nurture that network, and so one of the things that we're going to try to do over the next couple of months and next 2 years is continue to build this network of all of you. And how many people have heard of network mapping? Yeah, the University of Minnesota Extension Service actually does this, and it's pretty fascinating. So at some point, if we can get the funding, which we think we'll be able to, we're going to send out some information to everybody about who your networks are, and trying to map those networks to see what the huge network is. And then also not bring the blueprint back to the communities, because the blueprint came from the communities. But spread that strategy into local economic and community vitality strategy. So one of the things I'm asking for coming out of this meeting too is anybody who wants to work with me, with Brett, with others on the idea of how do we translate the equity blueprint into a community and economic development strategy for communities to follow at the community level and to inform as policy and strategy kind of go back and forth. And I've started to call it in my own head, and I know my friends and colleagues who know me know that I keep a lot of things in my head because I'm an introvert. So I'm throwing some stuff out at you today that is in my head. And it's the Be Amazing Minnesota components from the blueprint. Broadband, equity, enterprise, education, environment, all the stuff that's around us on the walls. Amazing Minnesota is a book that one of our board members wrote, Lee Lynch, about Minnesota's exceptionalism, but also about its disparities. And I would commend that book to you, because he asked me when I first took me out to lunch one of the first days on this job back in January and said, "What is the B, Jane? What is the B? What is the B for growth and justice? What is the B for Minnesota?" And it finally occurred to me that the B is the B, right? Okay, this is crazy, but the B is broadband, equity, enterprise, being enterprising. And if you just bear with me, and this is, again, something in my head, go ahead. Okay, there's the B. I'm being very vulnerable at this point, because I haven't shown this to a whole lot of people except for Kim. We had breakfast a couple weeks ago. You know, tear it up, but we won't tear it up today.
She's so much smarter than me.
So it occurred to.
Can you read the things?
I will read the things because it's a little hard here, but.
Can you just magnify it?
Can
Go
we
to
magnify it? It
go to
might be a little out of.
150%. Yeah.
It might be a little fuzzy, and I apologize for that because I'm still trying to figure out how to make it so that you can see it, but not lose all the pieces. So.
Maybe if you want to share and then we can send this out.
I'll send it to folks, but know that it's a draft and it's trying to show the whole system. And Kim can help me because she's an entrepreneur coach. She's probably saying, "Jane, it's too early to show this to everyone." No? Okay.
It's too complicated.
I think when we talked about, you know, this, if you read the Lean Startup, it's a minimally viable product. The way you refine and define and make things their greatest is by being willing to put them out when you're really vulnerable and when you're not, because you can sit in your own head and design it, but it won't be what it should be until you get it out to the people who use it.
And I've already changed a couple of things on here, even since I put this together, but, oh, and Katie's seen this too, because she's been helping me think through it, but, anyway.
Inclusion, but
So,
I get that.
so we have, you remember the flux capacitor in, Back to the Future? How many people remember that? The last scene, and the professor points back to, we don't need those, and he shoves the cans and the banana peels into the flux capacitor. This is the flux capacitor. The equity and inclusion driving our economy, driving our communities towards vitality. Okay, people are gonna think I'm really crazy. But we have to work on showing these kind of intangibles to people on what, we can show the equity and inclusion indicators from the Rockefeller Foundation until we're blue in the face, but how does it actually help us? And so here we are trying to create the legislative agenda this last 24 hours. State legislature and state agencies, local government policymakers, that's kind of the legislative agenda. But here's the handbook, it's the beekeeper's handbook. The blueprint is the beekeeper's handbook for a thriving, inclusive economy. And up here are the solutionaries, way up at the top. The Thriving by Design Network members, all you guys, you're the solutionaries. You're at the top, you're the bee's head.
And it creates these electromagnetic fields that...
Right. Well, and then the communities, so how many people remember Star City? Star Cities, right? Okay. How long has it been since we had a Star City program in Minnesota? Since the 1980s, 1990s. Last
30
attempt
years.
was Job Z, which was a colossal failure, sorry, but it was. It took money out of the community, it didn't put money in. And so, what if we took the blueprint, and I know Brett's talked about this, I've talked about it, but what if we took the blueprint and said, how do we apply these policies as strategies in a community? Because, as Mark Twain said, the change happens around the edges with everyday folks. We're all everyday folks. And so if the blueprint works in communities, it's going to start to move towards the center, so will the policy. The blueprint keeps us kind of guided, and we are pollinators. The network is pollinators. It also lends this idea that this is about the environment. It's about the business environment. It's about the environment. Somebody said, I think Nicolette, she's left, an eco-based economy. So I feel like I'm one of those.
You're doing great.
Okay, I'm doing great. Thank you, Monica. All right. So this is one of this is a very theoretical idea, but then you look at the outside ring here: equity and inclusion lens on all policymaking, enterprising people, communities and businesses, and enterprises, education, early childhood and lifelong investments, the environment, protecting and sustainably using Minnesota's #1 sustainable resource, which is our environment, and broadband, which apparently, according to everybody in this room too, is a huge driver, and I know it is. So that's the B: broadband, equity, enterprise, education, environment. Some of the highlights from the policies that we've been talking about here. So it's just theory. And Gail?
Right, use my mic. Can you hear me if I just talk? Okay. Thank you very much, Jane. So yeah, this is exciting but complicated, and we love it, so we'll listen. But I'm wondering, I don't mean that's not a slam. No. But it's like getting people's attention, and how do we make our case? And in my world, we made our case by telling a really compelling short story, and there was always an arc to that story, and then right away it was a hook, and then it was like, then they're willing to listen to the